This year I lost my dear husband, Edgar.
Stop telling people I'm dead.
Sometimes it's like I can still hear his voice. Welcome back to episode 3 of Crypts and Corks. I'm your host, DJ, here with my lovely co-host,
Paul, back as always.
So, Paul, how was your week?
Oh my gosh, my week has been busy. So last weekend, I did the Queen of Queens City pageant. As a former queen, I had to be there.
Well,
and then...
in the last episode, did you tell them that where it was, where you're from?
Yeah, so the Queen of Queens City pageant is actually in a little small town called Cumberland, Maryland. That's where I was born and raised. So I go back there every so often just to, twirl for the dolls a bit. Because, I used to be I'm a former Queen of Queens City. And then, so we did that, tired after that, and now I'm working all week. And then this weekend, I have to go be a frat boy. So it's very much like I go from one extreme to the other. And honestly, and if you can't accept me at both the drag queen and the frat boy, you can't accept me at all.
I think it would be very easy for you to tell guys that you date, if you can't accept me at my drag queen, you don't deserve me at my frat boy.
Exactly.
I feel like frat boy is one of those niche things that, the fellas are, thirsting after on TikTok. The frat boy with the chain and the backwards cap and the soup.
Exactly. And there's so much, porn made about frat boy. There's definitely...
Fraternity X, Haze Him. That was big when we were younger.
Right. And none of these were, accurate to my frat experience. We can talk about it more in a later pod, but, I never got hazed or anything. But back...
Greek life can be a scary story of their own sometimes.
Mm-hmm. Ain't that the truth? So I'll keep you guys updated with next week with how my frat boy weekend goes. How about you, DJ? How was your week?
Oh, the usual. I did attend the Queen of Queen City pageant with you as a guest, not as a drag queen. It was great to go down to your neck of the woods and see what that all was like. Do a little drinking out in the boonies, I guess, as my grandmother would say. Today I got called a slut and a whore for telling a guy in a relationship that I didn't want to be friends with benefits with him, and I'd rather put my energy towards finding a boyfriend of my own. So that's always fun and interesting.
Men are awful, honestly.
Just quirky things.
Quirky girl things.
Just very quirky.
Getting slut-shamed in 2023. Just quirky things.
First of all, it's ultimate slut-shaming to call somebody a slut who's not a slut.
Right.
Okay, it is, I think I'm very sex positive. I believe anyone should be able to sleep and do whatever with whoever they want, so long as it's consensual with a fellow adult.
Exactly.
And if you're in a relationship, your partner knows and is on board with it. So there should be no slut shame. But for me to say to somebody, I don't want to pursue a sexual relationship with you, a taken man, right, and rather put that energy into finding one of my own, I think that is the exact opposite of being a slut.
Right. You want to settle down. You want a man. You want something else. You don't want to be the side girl.
I am going to turn 27 this December. I would like to be married in my early 30s.
Right. Time's a ticking, girl.
I'm getting close.
I'm not going to be this pretty in another 10 years, so...
I'm not going to be this pretty in another... Let's not get into that.
Oh my gosh. Jesus.
Well, we're going to switch things up. I mean, we still are very early on. We have our general setup, but still getting to find minutia. I guess not, because we haven't done our tarot reading of the week yet.
Right, let's see what the tarot cards have to say.
We are going to go back to 3. This one isn't going to be... Amityville did not turn out to be as long as I thought, because Paul really kept his eye on the time and was able to let me know when we had an hour so that I was able to, like, start patching things in.
Right. I said, wrap it up, sis.
Before we go on, I would like to set the record straight. We did try to cut it down, and I forgot a great theory that I came up with on my own.
All right, what's the theory?
One thing that I had not mentioned in my rush to make sure that I got that whole story out was that not only did the Lutz family buy the DeFeo home, but for an extra $400, they got the furniture. I did mention that. To circle back to that, so when the Lutz family left and they left their share or their mortgage relapsed the bank, the house was foreclosed upon. The bank actually auctioned off all the possessions within the house. And after that, there were no more hauntings. So perhaps it was just the mixture of the DeFeo's furniture still being in the spot where they were murdered that led to the haunting.
Yeah, that would add to the residual energy, like if things still look the same and everything.
Exactly, and the fact that they're all there, and not even like residual. There could have just been some kind of evil energy there.
Oh, connected to the furniture, maybe?
Absolutely, because actually there are reports of this is claimed, assumed. I am not stating this as fact, but there were claims that Ronald DeFeo Sr. was a fairly aggressive man and that there may have been some abuse, but like from him to his wife Louise and to Butch, Ronnie Jr. Mm-hmm. So maybe there was some of that left. We don't know, but that was a really good theory that I'd come up with that we neglected to talk about last week.
I do like that theory. I'm glad you brought that up because I do like that theory. But back to our tarot reading for this week, seeing what's going on, what the universe has to say. Give him a little card shuffle ASMR gig. What do we got?
Ooh. One of these cards is really funny, and you'll find out why when I announce the topic.
Okay.
So our little 3-card spread, our first card we have the Emperor. And the Emperor is the ruler, he's the ruler of all the suits. Mm-hmm. He sort of is over them. But he's also a very wise, kind, benevolent ruler. Mm-hmm. So it really distinguishes somebody who is very in control of the space around them. That's a lot of balance in all aspects of their life. That's good. Sorry, I was just looking at what he had on his head. If anybody wants to know the deck that I use, this is my favorite deck. It is the Medieval Scapini Tarot, and I just love it because it's very medieval and Renaissance and has these beautiful, slightly shimmery gold backgrounds. Well, not really, it's like a matte gold, but it's just beautiful to look at. Card number 2, we have the Page of Cups. Pages are... What was that baseball?
No, the Page of Cups to me signifies the beginning of a creative journey or emotional journey.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah.
That's good. And then our last card, we have the Magician, which is another card all about controlling what's around you and being able to have control over all aspects. So this is where we're going to change things up. I'm going to show Paul our paranormal pairing before I let him read the little story introduction and go into the topic.
Okay, so what wine are we drinking today?
We have Spellbound.
Ooh, Spellbound. Oh, this bottle is so pretty.
It is a Petit Syrah from California. I'm going to read. It is vintage 2021. And the back says, everyone knows the warm sun nurtures plants, bringing grapevines to full maturity. But it's the moon, ruler of the tides, whose gravitational force helps pull water up from the soil during the cool nights that has influenced farmers since ancient times. Our food-friendly wines are true to their roots, expressing ripe varietal character and spell-binding flavors.
Now, who makes this wine again?
Spellbound.
Oh, that's the name of the company.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And I did not realize that until I was reading the back, and underneath that beautiful blurb, it says spellboundwines.com.
Girl, this is so beautiful. Such a beautiful bottle. Perfect for October. Perfect for Halloween.
And I do know, I do like Shiraz, and I believe Petit Syrah. I know Petit Syrah is related to Shiraz. If anyone so kindly in the comments if they would like to address whether it is the same thing or not in a very polite way, because I am asking to seek knowledge. So please don't dox me.
She's fragile.
I'm very fragile. When we start getting comments, I think Paul's going to be after the one who reads them, because he'll probably get huffy, but I will cry.
Oh, I'll come for bitches. Like, I mean, I'm not gonna spread like hate or anything on the internet. I'm not gonna respond to hate or anything, but girl, it's not gonna bother me. Comment what you want. Bring it on.
I think, as we mentioned in Mothman, despite the fact that we're Crypts and Corks, this one is a Crypt and Crack because it's a twist off.
Ooh.
Sorry, that was weak.
You're right. It's not as satisfying as like the pop of a cork. But you know, what can you do?
It does have a delightful bouquet.
Ooh.
That was a heavy pour, you can tell.
Right. Sometimes you just need a heavy pour.
We had to go into our office today. We're hybrid. Most of the time I work from home. Paul's a half step above me on the pecking order. So today was one of my days in there, and it was one of his days in there. But yay for paying for parking.
Cheers.
That is a good medium-bodied.
It's a little too dry for me. I'm not going to play. Now, if you like a dry wine, this wine is for you.
I don't think it's that dry. I've had drier.
See, I can't. If wine's too dry, I just can't. I like a sweet wine, you know. I'm a sweet boy. That's why.
Well, if you're not going to drink that, you're going to pass it to me before I pour another glass.
Trust and believe. You remember that whole frat boy thing? Trust and believe. I'm going to drink it whether it's good or not.
All right, Paul. Based on the wine pairing of this week, do you have any guesses at what tonight's topic is going to be?
The only famous witch that comes to mind is the Blair Witch.
It is not the Blair Witch.
Oh, really? I don't know then. She's the only, famous, spellbinding witch that's coming to mind.
All right, Paul. I'm going to tell you a story.
All right.
Lancashire, 1612. A peddler is struck lame moments after being cursed by a beggar girl. This would normally have been a story lost to history, except the girl openly admitted to selling her soul to the devil and to practicing witchcraft. Within weeks, 2 whole families and their neighbors were imprisoned by an ambitious judge in an effort to please a king obsessed with the idea witches were out to destroy him and steal his throne, leading to a trial with a shocking witness whose testimony would haunt history. Paul, this week we're going to discuss the Pendle Witches.
Oh, I've never heard of the Pendle Witches. I'm excited. This is new for me.
So the Pendle Witches, this is actually one of the most famous, if not the most famous, witch trials in English history or British history.
Oh, okay. See, all we hear about in the USA is about Salem. We never hear about, the witch trials that went on over there.
So, we're going to start our story, as I said, in the early 1600s. And throughout the previous century, continental Europe was just overrun with witch trials. Everywhere you went, they were experiencing them. Mm-hmm. But I know you didn't go to school for geometry.
Yeah.
England, though part of the continent of Europe, is actually an island, as is Scotland, which is to the north, and Ireland, which is to the west. Those are islands. So Ireland and Scotland are one island.
Yeah.
And they're connected by a border, and then Ireland is another island to the west.
Right, right.
And at this time, England and Scotland were separate nations. Ireland was technically, but the English bastards invaded and were ruling them.
It'd be like that some days.
It'd be like that somewhere. But because it was an island, witch trials really hadn't touched Britain yet.
Mm-hmm.
And that was until about 1590, when King James VI of Scotland married Princess Anne of Denmark.
Mm-hmm.
And so it started when, at this time, royals were married by proxy, which meant that diplomats would agree to the marriage, and a marriage would be held in one of the countries, even though either the bride or groom wasn't actually there. And then when the bride or the groom got there, they would have another wedding, and the marriage would start. But, like, this marriage by proxy was just like, okay, that's mine.
Oh, okay.
I'm going to put my bride on layaway.
Oh, jeez.
Yeah.
Girl.
So the marriage was done by proxy, and Anne and her ladies-in-waiting and her guards set off from Denmark, which is in continental Europe, and which had a ton of witch trials. They set off for Scotland. But bad weather drove them back to Denmark.
Okay.
So King James decides he's going to do something super romantic. He's going to leave his kingdom and go get his bride.
Okay.
And he had bad weather the whole way and nearly didn't make it.
Mm-hmm.
And he gets there and he marries Anne. And because it took so long to get around them, he just casually stayed there for like 2 years, year and a half.
Well, they traveled by sea, right?
Yes.
Yeah, well, sea travel back then was probably awful. So if I went through all that to get there, I'd stay there for a long time also.
Absolutely. But James stayed in Denmark, which was going through a witch hunt frenzy at the time. And he saw them up close and personal. And now, James fancied himself a theologian, which means a studier of religion. And this is at a time when Britain, both Scotland and England, were going through a shift from Catholicism to Protestantism. So it was really two different movements. Scotland was moving to Protestantism, which was anti-Catholic Church, in the way that Northern Europe was going through it, which was they had problems with the Catholic Church and they were leaving the church in protest. Well, England was going through it because Henry VIII really wanted to bone Anne Boleyn.
Oh, he was horny. He was coming for the doll.
Horny. And you know, Anne Boleyn knew what she was doing. She was like, you're married to another woman. You want to get with this? Marry me.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, she must have been one hell of a woman for him to leave the Roman Catholic Church for her.
Girl, she had the P power.
Even though she didn't give him a son and he beheaded her for it.
I mean, at that point, what can you do? I mean, if you're not serving your purpose. Which, that was totally a joke. Don't cancel me. Okay, I love women.
So this is coming at a time when Henry's daughter, Elizabeth I, is on the throne ruling in England. James is actually a great-nephew of Henry VIII. Henry VIII's sister was his grandmother.
Oh, okay.
And this will be important for a little bit later. So Elizabeth I was the fifth monarch of the Tudor family to rule England after her sister Bloody Mary, her brother Edward VI, and her father Henry VIII, and her grandfather Henry VII, who won the throne by killing the previous king, who had his nephews killed.
Okay.
after his brother died, who stole the throne off of another guy. So this is an era of huge political unrest.
It's very Game of Thrones.
It's very Game of Thrones. I mean, you've just had a century. You've just had a ton of war to decide who would be king, and now you're on that king's last grandchild.
Ooh, people are getting nervous.
And it's like, what's going to happen next? Because this is a time when the king ruled England. This was the person who governed. So keep all that political unrest in mind, and keep all that religious unrest in mind. So finally, in 1590, Anne and James are able to sail back to England after a number of storms blew them back to Denmark.
Oh my gosh.
And so James has just seen all of these witch trials, and he goes, I think witches may be out to get me. They tried to blow my wife on track. They tried to blow me off on track. And I think it's because witches are like Catholics, and they want to get rid of me for what good I am doing for Scotland.
Oh.
Which...
He's tying it back to his transfer to Protestantism. He's trying to tie the witches in with the Catholics.
Which I think it might be trauma. Some historians think that James the Sixth may have been homosexual. He had a very notable preference for male company over that of his wife and of women in general. This is a time when it was normal to have many, many children. He had 3. And beyond that, when he was just a couple months old, his mother had his father killed. He was then kidnapped by Scottish lords off of his mother, who was then forced to give up the throne. And then she was imprisoned by the English, who then beheaded her. So it could just be the trauma.
Trauma like that will do something to you.
But you know what the funny thing about trauma is when you are the king of a country and you have trauma, it's everybody's problem.
Right. He's going to make everyone suffer.
Because so the first thing James did when he got back was not make a baby.
Mm-hmm.
Instead, he went to a witch trial that was being held in Scotland.
Priorities. And
then he began to have witch trials of his own. One of the most notable was that of Agnes Sampson, whose torture, trial, and execution he personally oversaw. And they say to this day, the ghost of Bald Aggie, as she's known because she was stripped and shaved, can be seen wandering the royal palace in Edinburgh, screaming and pleading for her life.
Okay, but I would be so sick if they called me Bald Aggie. Could you imagine? That is the worst nickname. Oh, I'd be such an angry ghost.
And I mean, this was a huge cultural event. Like, this just made it spread like wildfire. They think that Agnes was actually the inspiration for the Weird Sisters, the 3 witches in Shakespeare's Macbeth. Like that. And at this time, James was nowhere near England. He was still in Scotland.
Mm-hmm.
And in 1597...
1597.
James published a book called Demonology, which was a book on how to hunt, try, and execute witches.
Oh my gosh.
And remember, this is the man who's in charge of ruling a country.
Is that called the Hammer of the Witches?
No.
No, that's
we'll
a different
come into
one.
That later.
Okay.
Yes. So right now you might be thinking, I thought you said this was an English witch trial. If James was king of Scotland, why is this England's problem? Well, in 1603, Elizabeth I died. Elizabeth was known as the Virgin Queen, so she obviously... Oh my god, your automatic trash can just opened. I think...
Right? It's all your shadow.
I think this is Elizabeth I saying she might not have been a virgin.
Oh my gosh.
She died, and she left the throne to James. As I said, she was her... They shared a common great-grandfather.
Mm-hmm.
No. Her mother and her shared a common great-grandfather. Shared a common grandfather.
That's quite the family tree.
It's quite the family tree because everyone's connected. It's a web. It's a web.
Oh, girl.
And so this is the end of the Tudor family ruling and gives rise to the Stuart dynasty. So James is now King James the Sixth and First. The Sixth of Scotland and the First of England. And one of the first things James did with all this new power was he sponsored the first English translation of the Bible, which we know today as the King James Bible. But very interesting, there is a passage in the Bible that reads, "Thou shalt not suffer a witch to live."
Oh.
So this dude is obsessed.
Right, he put it in the whole Bible, girl.
So, Paul, I'm going to show you a couple pictures here.
And we can link those pictures on our Instagram.
I will be on Instagram doing photo dumps for all these.
Yes, so if you want to pause and go to our Instagram and look at the pictures.
So this is King James the Sixth and First.
Okay, he's not the best looking.
No, and I mean, with all these frilly silken robes and big honking necklace, he kind of looks gay.
Right.
I mean, I have definitely been fondled with men who look like this in the club.
Oh my gosh. But I feel like that's just how the men dressed back then also. Like, not to downplay, like, yeah, he might have been gay, but...
And then this is him with his good lady wife, Anne of Denmark.
He looks thrilled to be with her. They both seem ecstatic. And if you're looking at the picture right now, you can see how sarcastic that comment was.
And then this was the original cover page of Demonology.
Oh, okay. It's
in form of a dialogue divided into 3 books, written by the high and mighty Prince James, by the grace of God, King of England, Scotland, France, and Ireland, defender of the faith, etc.
Wow. Sounds like a good read.
Okay, this actually wasn't the original cover page. This is one from 1603.
Oh.
And then, here's a picture of James purposely overseeing the torture of witches. From the book.
Girl.
See,
that don't sit right with me.
That's marketing. That is marketing.
In the worst, like, in the best way in that it was effective, but in the worst way that...
It's, okay, so I think to put this into perspective now, this is like Donald Trump and the border wall.
Exactly. Creating fear amongst the people.
Exactly. And I think Donald Trump would have gone so much further if there was a picture of him building that wall.
Oh my gosh. Don't
specifically,
say that, girl.
Specifically on the Mexican side, so he was outside of the country. But that's just my opinion.
Excuse me. Oh my gosh.
So shortly into James's reign, there was a huge assassination attempt. When I say huge, I mean people took barrels and barrels of gunpowder, which is an explosive, put them in the basements under the Houses of Parliament, and planned to blow up the entire government of England and Scotland, force one of James's daughters onto the throne, and force her to convert to Catholicism.
That's quite the plan. They're aiming big, aiming high, aiming large.
Meanwhile, and that's in London, meanwhile, in the north of England, you have Lancashire, or the county of Lancaster. which is very northern, it's very rural from the seat of government, and it's very Catholic because it's hard to enforce laws at this time because there's no real centralized force. It takes days to weeks to get information.
Mm-hmm.
And so as the Protestant Reformation is going on, a lot of people are like, yeah, whatever, but still maintaining their faith of Catholicism. So, to the government, not only is it this wild, lawless place because it's so far away, it's hard to get information there, but also because there's so many Catholics there, and you just had this Catholic assassination plot, where are those Catholics going to run? Lancashire. Which is where we come to the area of Pendle. And the area of Pendle was the area within Lancashire surrounding Pendle Hill, which when you say Pendle Hill, you think of like a beautiful sloping, like small hill. Mm-hmm. It sounds very idyllic. But Pendle Hill is actually rather big. I'm going to show Paul a picture, which will be in the photo dump.
It's a mountain. It's not a hill. It's a mountain. It
dominates the landscape, which is why the area gets its name. And in this very rural Lancashire town, residents really relied on women called cunning women. And cunning women were healers or wise women. And this is a time before doctors or therapists or nannies, or really anything that wasn't a farmer.
Mm-hmm.
And so you have a toothache, you go to the cunning woman.
Mm-hmm.
You have a broken heart, you go to the cunning woman. Your baby won't stop crying, you go to the cunning woman.
Mm-hmm.
You just smacked your head over the head with a rolling pin because he annoyed you so much, you go to the cunning woman.
Ooh, girl.
And so these cunning women really used a variety of herbal remedies and homemade charms. And I mean, this sounds very antiquated to us, but I've used essential oils when I've had a cold. I've drank tea to get rid of a cold, which are very much things that a cunning woman would give you.
Right. They're giving green witch, like cottage core.
It's very green witch.
Like,
and at this time, like, it wasn't... Witch was a bad term. Mm-hmm. A witch was somebody who cursed you and gave you bad luck. A cunning woman was somebody who gave you good luck and helped you with your problems.
Right.
But both of them use herbs and spells and charms. It's just the outcome that's different. So it was very important to have good customer satisfaction, because much more dangerous than a bad Yelp review was if your dissatisfied customer went and it wasn't, Goody Miltonberger's tea didn't actually help my foot ache. It was, Goody Miltonberger's a witch. She gave me tea that made it so I couldn't stand on my feet.
Ooh. That could go downhill real quick.
Absolutely. I mean, just think about... in this era, Karens did not have Yelp or Facebook to complain on. They did have the local constable, and they did have witchcraft.
And gossip. News travels fast.
And so one of these cunning women was a woman who was named Her name was Elizabeth Southern.
Oh, like Southern States.
Exactly. But everyone knew her as Old Demdike.
Oh, not the slur.
I don't think it's a slur.
No, it's probably part of her name or something.
We're going to call her family the Demdikes.
Mm-hmm.
And she was the matriarch of her family, and she was a cunning woman in the area. And she lived in a house called Malkin Tower.
Okay. Stan that. Would love to live in the Malkin Tower.
Well, Malkin Tower sounds like a beautiful, grand manor house, right? It wasn't. It was a cottage or a hovel. Probably had 2 rooms, maybe a room and a loft. Another name for Malkin Tower at this time was Mucking Tower. Mucking was Lancastrian slang for shit.
Girl, so she was catfishing with that name.
Yes, and just to give you an idea of why this was not a luxurious house, when she wasn't being a cunning woman, her and her family were beggars.
Oh, okay.
They were not farmers. They were not crafty people like cobblers or blacksmiths. They were beggars.
Jeez, they were on the street just trying to
They were beggars. And she lived with her adult daughter, Elizabeth Devise, and Elizabeth's 3 children, Allison, James, and Janet.
Okay. Full house.
Very full house. I believe Janet was the only daughter of Elizabeth's husband. And I believe the other 2 were illegitimate.
Mm-hmm.
It is, however, known that Janet is illegitimate because she was conceived and born after her husband's death. And it should be noticed that Elizabeth's husband made yearly payments to another cunning woman in the local village named Anne Whittle, better known as Old Chaddocks, who's the matriarch of the Chaddocks family. And he supposedly did this because he was terrified of Old Chaddocks putting a curse on him, and this was sort of protection. Mm-hmm. And he would make her a yearly payment of oatmeal.
Oatmeal?
They're beggars. They didn't have money.
Oh, they'll take what they can get.
So he probably saved up oatmeal all year long to pay her. And he only missed one payment. And that same year, he died. And on his deathbed, he said it was Old Chaddocks who cursed him for not making the payment of oatmeal.
Wait, so he saved the oats? Or because if once you make oatmeal, it's
No, not like oatmeal the meal.
Mm-hmm.
But in the packet or in the canister before you make it, like that.
Okay.
So the ground oats to then make the meal.
See, that makes more sense.
Yeah. So it's like the Quaker Oats when you get it out of the pack.
Oh, she was popping her pussy for those Quaker Oats.
But the original flavor, not the apple cinnamon and not the brown sugar.
Girl, she was going to flavor them herself.
Paul, I know you don't like breakfast food, but do you like oatmeal?
Sometimes if I'm on a health kick, I'll take oatmeal and I'll mix it with peanut butter and honey.
Oh,
that's
I'll have to
good.
try that. Because I was going to ask you, do you have a favorite flavor? And that's good.
Mm-hmm.
Because I was going to say, I like plain oatmeal, but I add honey to it. But I'm definitely going to add peanut butter to it next time. Because I love some peanut butter.
For sure.
So you have these 2 families, the Demdikes and the Chaddockses. And they're rivals. And not only are they professional rivals, because Old Demdike and Old Chaddocks are both... I know.
Old Demdike. I'm sorry, that's so funny to me.
I know, it sounds like a lesbian bar.
It does. We're gonna go down to the Old Demdike, try and wrangle up some ladies.
So they're rival businesses because the thing is, you would swear by your cunning woman. If you went to Old Demdike, she was a cunning woman. That Old Chaddocks, she's a witch. She'll curse you. And you never went to Old Chaddocks.
Really?
And vice versa. If you went to Old Chaddocks, it was because she was a cunning woman, and that Old Demdike, she was a witch, she would curse you.
Loyalty. I appreciate it.
But also, in the early 1600s, in about 1601, one of the Chaddockses broke into Mucking Tower and stole £1, like the English pound, like pound sterling, worth of goods. Which, to us Americans, you go, they stole $1 worth of goods, what's the big deal? With inflation now, that's over £100 worth of goods.
Right, that was way back in the day.
You stole a lot of stuff from this beggar family.
Right.
Maybe this is why they got into begging.
Probably.
So, just to recap. England has a new king. who just comes from a dynasty who got his power from being related to this dynasty who usurped the throne,
Mm-hmm.
in a country that is reeling from that political chaos. You have religious chaos as they're shifting between Catholicism and Protestantism.
Mm-hmm.
And it should be noted that James I, Catholicism is heresy, and witchcraft is heresy, therefore Catholicism is witchcraft.
Right.
And you've just had the king nearly blown up.
Mm-hmm.
So this is total chaos.
Yeah, lots going on, girl.
And that is where we find ourselves in early 1612, when in an effort to find Catholics and witches and political dissidents, who are three separate things, but also the same thing.
Right.
James I issues a law that all Lancashire justices of the peace, who are like judges, have to compile lists of non-churchgoers.
Oh, see, that's a problem.
Well, to this day, the King of England is head of the Church of England, which is the state religion.
Mm-hmm.
So when you have a state religion, you can make laws about religion.
Yeah, I don't mess with that. I don't like that.
Yeah. But this was to weed out, because Catholicism was outlawed at this time. This was to weed out practicing Catholics and practicing witches, who are different, but also the same.
That's different.
And so, which brings us to the day of March 12th, 1612. Alison Device, the elder daughter of Elizabeth, eldest granddaughter of Old Demdike, is walking down a path towards the trodden forest when she met John Law, who is a peddler, with his son Abraham. And now, Alison claims that she asked him to buy some metal pins. Later, John and Abraham would say she was begging for them.
Mm-hmm.
Either way, he said no. Metal pins, they were rare, and also, if they were at the bottom of his pack, are you really going to open up your pack and take everything to either give or sell a couple metal pins?
Probably not.
And the other thing is, pins are really commonly used in witchcraft at this time. They were used in remedies, and they were also used for love magic.
Ooh, that was probably popular.
So whether it was he didn't think she had the money, he didn't want to pull them out, he didn't want to give them to her, or he thought she was a witch, he said no. And here's the thing, he's a peddler, he's higher status than this girl, so he wasn't nice about it.
Mm-hmm.
So he very rudely refused her and goes walking on, and Alison does what so many of us do when somebody's rude to us on the street. She curses him. Now, it's not known if she said something like, "Go to hell," which is a curse, or "fuck you," which is also a curse, or "may the devil lame you," which is also a curse.
Right.
No matter what she said, it was a curse. I mean, I've definitely, in a moment of road rage, yelled at somebody, "I hope you get head lice."
Right. As we've all been there.
But the difference is, when I yelled that at that person, they did not then pull their car off to the side of the road and yell, "I have head lice," out of nowhere.
Oh.
What did happen in this instance was John Law collapsed, convulsing, unable to speak or move.
Do you think he was putting on a show, or...?
No, he was for real. He could not get up. And so his son Abraham had to carry him to a local inn, and Alison, for her part, was horrified by what had happened, and she followed. And when John Law was put into a bed in the inn, she got onto her knees weeping, saying, "I am so sorry I cursed you. I am so sorry I cursed you," because she believed she had the power as Old Demdike's granddaughter to curse someone.
Okay.
Now, she is apologizing.
Mm-hmm.
But if you think about it, an apology is also an admission of guilt.
Oh, for sure, yeah.
So Abraham goes to the local magistrate, Roger Knoll, who is a very ambitious man. And now this is a time when judges, they get their job directly from the king. And so he's hoping to get favor with the king. And he thinks, oh yeah, witches. My dude Jimmy in London, he's obsessed with witches. I'm going to suss out some witches. I'm going to get that promotion. I'm going to get a Pendle. I'm going to get away from these beggars. Yeah. So he calls Allison, her mother Elizabeth, and brother James to his courtroom.
Mm-hmm.
And they enter, and Allison breaks down and she says, yes, I sold my soul to the devil. I told the devil to lame John Law, and he did.
Girl, why would you say that?
She thought it. She believed it.
Even if she believed it, girl, that is not going to end well for you.
I mean, you also have to remember that up until this point, most witches were tortured to get confessions. So maybe she...
Okay.
So let's hypothetically say she didn't believe it. I do think she believed it.
Yeah.
Which she shows a clear pattern as the story goes on, that she believed she was a witch and that she had cursed this man.
Mm-hmm.
But let's think that she didn't. All these stories about all these witches, confessions only came after torture. So maybe she thought, if I confess, maybe he'll just let me go home.
Maybe. Or just to avoid the torture, like you said.
Exactly. Well, things quickly devolve into chaos. Because she says, not only am I a witch, my grandmother, old Demdike, she's a witch. That's where I learned it. That's where I get my power. And you know what? That old Chattox, she's a witch too. She cursed my father and she killed him. And as she's babbling all this, James, her brother, says, oh yeah, my sister's a witch. I dead-ass seen her curse a child.
Oh my god, they're throwing everyone under the bus.
And now you would hope that the mother, Elizabeth, would control her children. Instead, and she is definitely more reserved than her children, she just goes, my mother does have a witch's mark on her body where the devil sucked blood. I'm not saying she is a witch, I'm just saying she does have a witch's mark.
Girl, what is going on here?
So Noel's like, I really hope he pulled a Judge Judy where he banged on the bench and tapped his watch and said, ain't nobody got time for this.
Mm-hmm.
But he did send for old Demdike and old Chattox, who are both in their 80s and are nearly blind.
Ooh, they probably look like witches.
And he says, are you two witches? And they say, yep, we sold our soul to the devil.
Why are they admitting this all so freely? Like, I get the torture thing.
Maybe they believed it. B, maybe it was to escape torture. C, maybe they were trying to save their families.
Oh.
Because Noel arrested Allison and old Demdike, her grandmother, old Chattox, and old Chattox's daughter, Anne Redfern. And he sent them to Lancaster County, which was the local prison.
Mm-hmm.
And now, let me see. And I'll get into Lancaster Castle in a little bit. And should be the end of the story. He arrested some witches, he sent them to prison to go on to trial later. Except, on Good Friday, April 10th, 1612, when all the good law-abiding Protestants are in Protestant church, Elizabeth and James had a gathering at Malkin Tower.
Mm-hmm.
Which, coincidentally, James stole a neighbor's sheep to serve as dinner.
Damn, he stole someone's whole sheep and then
he's a beggar.
Okay, oh my gosh.
Sheep was a very common food. Mutton, we've all heard mutton.
Right. So I eat sheep. I'd do it.
So, I mean, it's not an unusual thing. He stole sheep, he made mutton.
The sheep's not the problem. It's because he stole it.
Exactly. So we have one crime there. We have two crimes because, remember, lists of all non-going church members. But, so, people who are sympathetic to the family's plight came. Well, remember that law about non-churchgoers. So Noel and a constable go and arrest everyone who's there.
Jeez.
And so that's a further 8 people. Elizabeth, James, Catherine Hewitt, John Bullock, his mother Jane Bullock, Alice Gray, Janet Preston, and Alice Nutter.
Okay.
All were sent to Lancaster Castle except for Preston, who was from Yorkshire, and so she was sent to neighboring Yorkshire for trial.
So wait, the prison's called Lancaster Castle?
Yes, because it was the castle in the county of Lancaster.
Okay, that makes sense.
And because Janet Preston was from York, she was sent to York Castle.
Okay.
Whatever York's prison was called. And now, all of these people are peasantry. They're low-level farmers or they're beggars, except for Alice Nutter. Alice Nutter was actually a fairly wealthy woman from a very well-known and respectable family. She was actually married to a human farmer who was dead, and when he died, he left all of his property to her, so she was a landowner. But the Nutter family was notorious for being, if not Catholics, Catholic sympathizers. 2 of Alice's cousins were Jesuit priests who had been executed for treason.
Oh.
So, we'll get into that later. But it's believed that she was just seen passing or stopping at Malkin Tower to say, I'm so sorry about your grandmother and your daughter, on her way to meet with other Catholics in the area, or perhaps to attend a secret Catholic mass.
Okay.
So they're all imprisoned in a 20-foot by 12-foot cell in what is now called the Witches' Tower in Lancaster Castle, which is probably the size of this room.
Okay. So the size of your average kitchen.
And I mean, your kitchen, this is a dining kitchen.
Yeah.
It's pretty big. But I mean, you have the 8 people who were sent there.
Mm-hmm.
Plus the original 4, that's 12.
That's a lot.
And then there were 6 to 8 other prisoners in there.
Oh, no, ma'am. That's too many. No, ma'am.
Now, a little bit about Lancaster Castle. To tell you about how glamorous it was first built in the 11th century. That's the 1000s.
Oh, wow.
As a Norman fortress during the reign of William the Conqueror, who was a French noble who conquered England and declared himself King of England.
Mm-hmm.
It was first used as a prison in 1196 and continued to operate as a prison until 2011.
How many years is that? That has to be like more than 100 years. Like...
I think that's more than 1,000. That's
really?
More than 1,000, I think.
Well, I didn't go to school for math, so...
It's very nearly 1,000. Let's see, 2011 minus 1196. That's 882 years.
Jesus.
I want to do that again just to make sure that I typed in everything right.
They built that with sticks or something, girl.
815 years.
Yeah, that's a long-ass time.
Also, I want to know, what were the conditions like in 2011 when the last prisoners left?
Right.
Like, it was not, like...
How was it standing, first of all?
Well, these things are built to last. Like...
Apparently.
This thing was built to... Because, not to, like... So, this was, like... We think of, like, Cinderella Castle in Disney World. No, this was more a fort with, like, heavy stone walls that was meant to keep out armies with cannons or catapults. Because you have to, like... think back to its origination. You have this French guy who's coming in and saying, I am the king now. And a lot of, like, England's greatest castles were built by him.
Mm-hmm.
Because he was like, you know what? To prove I'm king, I'm going to have this fortress, so if you try to invade, you can't get me.
Right, right.
So that's why it was so long-lasting. But also, it's stone. It's stone. And there's no central heating. And I'm sure they didn't have a fireplace in that 20 by 12 foot cell.
Right.
And I'm sure the food was just gruel.
Yeah.
And I'm sure they didn't have glass in the window.
Definitely not the Four Seasons.
So they were kept there from March for the original 4, and then the other 8 were, or 7 technically, because Janet Preston was sent to Yorkshire.
Mm-hmm.
So that makes 4.
How long were they there?
4 plus 7. From March or April till August.
Okay, well at least those were like warmer months.
But still, during this time, old Demdike died.
Aw,
Likely of the squalid conditions. And actually, there was a condition at the time called prison fever or jail fever. Because you were in a room with hay that everyone slept or walked on, and everyone peed on, and everyone ate on.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that just makes for disease.
Right, it's not sanitary. Like, you're gonna catch something, probably.
Which brings us to the trial. So, this is probably one of the most famous witch trials, if not the most famous, because it was recorded in such detail by Thomas Potts, the court clerk, who would later publish a book called The Wonderful Discovery of Witches in the County of Lancaster.
Mm-hmm.
Not to keep harping on the political stuff because this is a paranormal podcast, but Thomas actually dedicated this to his mentor and his mentor's wife, who just so happened to be the guy who caught the guy who was planning on assassinating the king in that gunpowder pot.
Okay.
And one of the things that was accused of the witches was that they were planning to and orchestrating their own gunpowder plot, but they were going to blow up Lancaster Castle and free the Catholics to overrun the country. So I think I see a political agenda.
Right, right.
So the trial starts, and immediately Allison doesn't even try to defend herself from the charges. She just immediately falls to her knees, weeping, confessing to selling her soul to the devil and to witchcraft. And even when John Law entered, she got down on her knees and she begged him to forgive her. Mm-hmm. But John Law still gave testimony, and he testified that after she cursed him, he saw a large dark dog, either black or dark brown, which twice threatened him in English that he was going to lame him before actually attacking him.
Wow.
But actually, there's this wonderful, sweet moment where after he said this, the judge said to her, "Is this true?" And she got down on her knees and she wept. And she said, "It is true, and I would do anything to take it back. And I pray to God that he forgives me, and I pray that John Law forgives me." And John Law, from the witness box, said, I do forgive you."
That is nice. That's real sweet.
And actually, during either the interrogations leading up to the trial or during the trial, Allison was asked, "Can you reverse the laming of John Law?" And she said no. And they said, "Do you know anyone who can?" And she said, "Yes, my dead grandmother, old Demdike, could."
Oh, rip Demdike.
Which, here's a conspiracy theory. Maybe the jailers knew she couldn't do it, and they killed old Demdike.
Oh, jeez.
Justice for old Demdike. Gone too soon, like Harambe.
She's my cunning woman. I have my Demdike loyalty rewards card. It has a couple stamps on it.
I think that has to be our first t-shirt.
My Demdike rewards card.
I like that. And then on the back you can say, I only go to Old Demdike for my cunning.
Yes. She's serving cunning.
Elizabeth, on the other hand, was very vocal about her innocence. She refused to admit to ever practicing witchcraft or to selling her soul to the devil. This was all a mistake, and she had to be released.
Oh.
This is when Noel introduced his star witness. 9-year-old Janet Device, Elizabeth's youngest daughter.
Mm-hmm.
Elizabeth went wild, screaming at her daughter, "Don't you say anything! Don't you say anything! Not a word!" Threatening her, pleading with her, "Please don't say anything! Please don't say anything!" Janet immediately bursts into tears and looks to the judge and says, "I will not say a thing until she is removed from court." And Elizabeth is removed from court. And actually, Thomas Potts did not like Elizabeth at all. He actually said that she had called her a wretched witch and spoke quite a lot about her having the most horrendous facial deformity where one eye sat higher and one sat lower on her face.
Oh, girl.
Maybe she was just a little wall-eyed.
I don't think that's wall-eyed. That's up and down. That's not the wall.
But here's the thing.
That's floor-ceiling-eyed.
No, he meant like the place of her eye, but maybe they just pointed two different directions and he was being extra mean. Like, he did not like her, so maybe he was just being mean.
Right.
But she was removed from court. At which point, Janet jumped onto a table, calmly and clearly and very vividly denounced her sister as a witch, her grandmother as a witch, her brother as a witch.
So by denounce, you mean she was saying they weren't witches?
They were witches. And she had seen it. She had borne witness to it. I have a quote here. "My mother is a witch, and that I know to be true. I have seen her spirit in the likeness of a brown dog, which she called Ball. The dog did ask what she would have him do, and she answered that she would have him help her to kill."
Oh my gosh.
Now remember, what did John Law say he had seen when Allison cursed him?
The dog.
And later on, we'll do an episode on black dogs, and specifically Old Shuck, which is another Old English folklore about a black demon dog. Which that's a part of the larger English folklore. Mm-hmm. James also attested to his mother was a witch, and Janet in turn denounced him. And she said, "She's a witch, you're a witch. You've been a witch for 3 years."
Mm-hmm.
So now that she's gotten rid of her entire family, remember, there are 7 people in this courtroom.
Yeah.
Who are not her family. And at this point, they're calling that Good Friday meeting a witch's feast.
Mm-hmm.
And so I have a picture. And this is actually from Demonology. This would not be a picture of the actual thing, but it is of a bunch of witches with devils around the table having a feast. So I can imagine this is what's in everyone's mind.
Looks like my kind of party.
And then, ye old getting down on the Good Friday with the devil.
Ye old getting down, girl.
And then this is probably... So not only were they accused of witchcraft, they were all accused of murder by witchcraft. So it was... This person died and you killed them using witchcraft. So this is another picture from Demonology and features a male witch and a female witch with a black devil in between them. All 3 of them are riding broomsticks, terrorizing a peasant woman in the fields.
Jesus. That's wild.
Oh, and that's a picture of Lancaster Castle.
Well, it's big. It's pretty.
It's big, and it is pretty, but you have to remember that it was a prison until 2001.
Wait, 2011.
2011, thank you. Which is worse. So then Noel asks Janet, can you go into the gallery where the other accused are and point out the witches? And now, so he arranged for there to be the 7, but there to be others there too. Mm-hmm. And she went through and she picked out every single accused. Even and especially Agnes, no? Is it Agnes Nutter? Alice Nutter. Alice Nutter.
Okay.
Alice or Agnes?
We gotta take a moment for a fact check, people.
I might be confusing. I think it's Alice. It's Alice Nutter.
Alice, okay. Like Wonderland.
Yes, it's Alice Nutter. So later on, in the Amazon Prime TV series Good Omens, there is a witch. And the author of the original book, who consulted or co-wrote the screenplay, did say that he used a lot of these names for the witches in that. And the main witch was Agnes Nutter. And also, I was talking about Agnes Sampson earlier, so please forgive me. No disrespect to Alice Nutter. But she took Alice Nutter by the hand and said, you had the prettiest dress on there. Which is notable because she was the only person not of peasantry who was accused of being there.
Okay.
So you're probably saying she was coached. But the judge said to her, did you see there or know of a witch named Sadie Black? And this was a made-up name that the judge came up with.
Yeah.
And she confidently turned to the judge and said she knew of no one by that name.
Okay, so she's
not making this up to get out of it. And maybe she was coached. Now, this is pretty remarkable because up until this time, according to English law, children under the age of 14 were not allowed to testify in court. They were deemed to be too young, too easily to be coached.
For sure. Yeah, makes sense.
But this was the only witch trial. This was one of the only witch trials, if not the only, to use as its basis not the Holy Bible, not the Malleus Maleficarum, the Hammer of the Witches, which was written a century earlier.
Mm-hmm.
Instead, they used a little book called Demonology by King James. And one of the big things in demonology was James said, normal laws should be not used in witch trials, especially the testimony of children. It is vital to witch trials. And actually, this case would actually be later cited in English law books, including a very famous one written by Michael Dalton.
So it said that children's testimonies are vital.
Vital. Okay. Especially in witch trials.
Okay. Well, that's shady.
And it's cited, such as in the 1912 witch trial of the Pendle Witches, including which hinged on the testimony of Janet Device against her mother, Elizabeth Device, an accused witch.
Mm-hmm.
Now, for her part, Alice Nutter made no comment before or during her trial except to plead not guilty. This was probably because she didn't want to rat out her fellow Catholics.
Right.
So if there's a hero in this story, I think it's kind of Alice Nutter.
Mm-hmm.
No shade to old Demdike.
Rip.
Love that rewards program. All 7, or no, sorry, the only one of the 7 no, that's not right. How many were there? Because we had 4 initially arrested, and then 8, but only 7 went.
Okay, yeah.
So 4, that's 11. Old Demdike died, so 10 went on trial. 9 were found guilty. The only one found innocent was Alice Gray. All of them were executed by hanging on August 20th, 1612, on Gallows Hill, which is now the site of a children's playground.
Oh my gosh. And I bet you that's haunted too.
Except for Janet Preston, who was hung in York on July 29th.
Oh my gosh. There has to be some story about the playground being cursed or ghosts or something. Because there's no way, like, there's going to be 9 or how many ever witches hung there, and there's no, like, sort of folklore around that.
So, Janet Device is now an orphan. You think she'd be lost to history. And she was, until 1633. In November of that year, a boy named Edmund Robinson was late coming home. And when he came home, he told his parents why he was late. He was out in the wood, gathering berries. Berries and cream, berries and cream. I'm a little lad who loves berries and cream. Except he was a peasant boy, so he probably had no cream.
Oh my gosh. I think it's time for me to go home.
When he saw 2 greyhounds, those are hunting dogs, in the woods. And he saw a rabbit run past. And being a boy who wanted to have hunting dogs, he wanted to see the greyhounds chase the rabbit. But they refused to get up from where they were laying down. So, I'm so sorry, trigger warning, he beat the dogs.
Oh my god.
But it's not animal abuse because one turned into a witch and the other turned into a boy. And at this point, the witch turned the boy who had been a greyhound into a horse and grabbed Edmund and swept him under the horse and swept him to a barn, which was filled with 60 witches, at which point he fled all the way home.
It's quite the story.
It's quite the story. And at this point, if I was late coming home and my mother was pissed and I told her this story, I'd get beat.
Right. That sounds like you're just pulling stuff out of your ass.
And my mother never hit me. I would be beat for telling this story.
Right. It's obviously a lie, like.
But Edmund's father spent the next 3 months taking him to all the local churches and all the local villages, where he'd be set on a stool. From where he would point the witches he had seen in the barn.
Oh my god. He went on tour.
He went on tour.
Literally went on his own Renaissance tour.
There are literally accounts of him doing this. Like,
oh my god.
History.
He liked the attention, girl. Like,
20 people were arrested and sent to Lancaster Castle based on his pointing.
Yeah.
Including a Janet Device.
Oh my gosh.
Accused of killing Isabel Nutter, wife of William Nutter. I didn't get into all the murder names, but it was, all the names were coming back up.
Mm-hmm.
All of them. If somebody was accused in 1612, one of their kids was murdered by a witch later.
Mm-hmm.
Or somebody who was killed earlier was a witch later.
Oh my
like
gosh.
One of their descendants. They're all interconnected. That's how small this village is.
Jeez.
So she was actually imprisoned in Lancaster Castle and underwent trial there. Just like the one she testified at. 32, because it wasn't held till the next year, 32 years before.
Mm-hmm.
Which I would like to think of the irony of her sitting in the same cell that she forced her grandmother, mother, sister, and brother to stay in.
Right. Oh, how the turntables.
So, 17 out of those 20 are found guilty, but the judges don't sentence them to death. Instead, they send them for a retrial by the king himself in London. And you're probably thinking, no, James is obsessed with witches. But by this time, witch trials are becoming a little passé. In fact, 4 years after the Pendle Witch trials, James I had actually rebuked judges in the case of witchcraft in Leicester when he found the boy who testified. Based off the testimony given from Janet Device, he was allowed to testify. And the boy had lied, and he crumbled when the king said, "So what did you see?" Mm-hmm. So James I ended up becoming skeptical. And more than that, he died in 1625 and passed his throne to his son, Charles I, who is very skeptical about witches. Mm-hmm. And to add to that fact, remember how Catholicism and witchcraft is one and the same?
Yeah.
He was married to a Catholic, the French princess Henrietta Maria.
Huh, imagine that.
So, 4 of the 17 were sent to London to testify, but Janet actually remained back in Lancaster. And to talk about like viral pop culture, this whole trial, this second trial, became a sensational play in London. Oh. And actually, the jail where they were held, what you could do is you could go see the 4 witches for pennies in the morning, and then go see the play in the afternoon.
Oh my gosh. I mean,
it's the whole Era store. It's the Era store.
Girl, I would have went, honestly, low-key.
So this stuff gets real. Charles I sent his personal physician, William Harvey, who, this is no 17 or 1600s doctor. This man discovered how the circulation system worked.
Oh.
To examine the accused for witches' marks. Mm-hmm. And he said, these aren't devil bites or witches' teats. These are birthmarks or scars or, I don't know, blemishes like freckles or pimples.
Oh my gosh.
So at this point, Edmund is brought to the Privy Council and the king, and he completely falls apart. He admits he actually based his story off the stories he heard about the Device family and the witches' feast held in their house. And actually, all those accused were people his father were blackmailing who refused to pay.
Oh my gosh. How opportunistic.
I mean, literally, like, it's like, oof.
It's like the back then version of having a child star as your kid.
Oh, yeah. It was, oof. All 17 accused were acquitted. That doesn't mean they were released. Because at this time, when you stayed in prison, you were responsible for paying room and board, so for your food and upkeep while you were there. Now remember, Janet Device came from a beggar family, and she probably never rose above that. And she was unable to pay her debt. And the last mention of her was 2 years later as still residing in the prison. So it's very likely she died in the same prison. I like to think in the same cell as where her grandmother, Old Demdike, had died.
Karma.
Now, petitions were circulated in 1998 and 2008 to have the 9 condemned Pendle Witches and then, yes, the 9 condemned Pendle Witches pardoned of their crimes, but both times the UK Home Office, which controls the justice system, declined to do so. So technically, the Pendle Witches still remain guilty of witchcraft.
That's terrible. The church should, pardon them or something.
So, in conclusion, Janet Device died in the same prison as the one where those who were executed based on her testimony. But her story doesn't end there. Her testimony began the precedent of children being allowed to testify in court, so long as the judge decides that they can understand the questions asked of them, which continues to this day. And she was directly cited in Dalton's Country Law, a common law book used throughout the burgeoning British Empire, stating that the testimony of children was vital in the cases of witch trials. It would be on the judge's bench in another witch trial, not even 60 years after Janet Device died, where a group of children accused 200 people in their village of witchcraft. 30 would be convicted, and 19 would hang in Salem, Massachusetts, thanks to the precedent set by Janet Device. And that, Paul, is the story of the Pendle Witches.
Oh, I like that story. That was such a good story.
Thank you.
I mean, I wouldn't want to live it, but it's interesting to hear about. Oh my gosh, the karma of it all.
I mean, it
Crazy.
does have this wonderful, like, most witch trials, like the Salem witch trials, don't have a happy ending. Like,
Right.
the witches are hung, the accused witches. The accused witches are hung and they die.
Right.
But, like, Janet Device, who was so pivotal, having it turned her, like, it's like a movie.
Right, it really is. Oh my gosh.
So, normally we discuss theories.
But there's really no theories. Like,
It's really just a case of, like, political and religious intolerance winning out.
right.
Which is a systemic problem to this day.
For sure, for sure. We can still learn from our past, people.
One of my biggest sources of this, and it was actually what first brought me in contact with the story, is a documentary from England called The Pendle Witch Child. You can actually find it on YouTube for free. And it's a great place for a lot more information, but at the end it does sort of bring these trials back and the religious and political intolerance to today. And it was made in 2011, I think, maybe a little earlier, maybe 2008, but it actually cited like the feeling of animosity against Muslims in the post 9/11 world as being exactly the same thing as this.
I mean, I get that for sure. I see it.
So, witch trials.
Yeah, oh my gosh. What a good freaking story. I have my Demdike loyalty rewards card. Like, I'm ready to get more stamps on it. Like, iconic.
Maybe rather than a t-shirt, we'll make keychains.
And they're the actual rewards card.
Yeah, we'll make like a fake barcode on the back, and I think it'll just be like 666 over and over again. No, it'll be 666, 1612, 666, 1612, 666.
Yes, and we're copywriting that.
We're copyrighting that. Nobody takes that. TM.
Yes, trademark, copyright, all of the above.
And like on the front, it will say like, like cunning woman rewards. And on the back, we'll have this fake barcode.
Right.
Merch ideas.
Period.
All right.
Capitalism.
Well, thank you for listening about the, you were probably so scared when I said 1612.
Right. No, I learned something today. I didn't know what the Pendle. I can't even say it. The Pendle Witches were. So thank you for sharing all of that amazing story. They really should make that into a movie.
There's a documentary. There are books based on that, and maybe we eventually, when we have more listeners, we can do a little book club, read a novel about the Pendle Witches.
I'm here for it. I'm down.
Also, we are not sponsored, but you can watch season 1 of Good Omens on Amazon Prime, which, like I said, some of the witchy aspects of that were inspired by this case and the people in it.
Okay. I'll have to give it a good old check out.
Absolutely. It's very good. In that case, thank you all for listening. Be sure to like, subscribe, comment. If you don't like us, please just stop listening. Don't leave us a nasty review. That will just hurt us more than it will help us, because good reviews will get us to the top to get us new listeners. So if you just don't like us, just don't listen.
Right.
If you have topic suggestions, or if you have paranormal stories of your own, because we would love to start doing listener stories, please email us at cryptsandcorks@gmail.com.
Or if you just have general questions, we'll answer your questions on the pod.
Absolutely. And please like our Instagram page. It's at Crypts and Corks Pod. We're really doing a big push and promotion. Paul, where can the listeners find you when you're not at home?
When I'm not at home, you can follow me on Instagram. It's Paul Ember, Paulember.
And if you'd like to follow me when I'm not at home, my Instagram is at DJ Chessy, CHESSEY Powers, POWERS on Instagram. And
That'll do me.
that'll do me. Thank you all so much for listening. And remember to keep your crypts tight
And your corks loose.
Bye.
Bye.